Ever since I took a palette knife decorating class for cake and buttercream in South Korea while I was living in Seoul, I have wanted to apply those techniques to macarons. And while I've played around a bit with adding buttercream with palette knives to macarons, I wanted to try it with royal icing and just see what I could create to create an image that lasted a little bit longer. So I'm using one of my favorite palette knives. It's a really thin and fine that you could really use whatever palette knife you want. This brand is a Korean brand called Hwahong. I will leave a link down below to the Korean site, and I know you can get them on places like Etsy or eBay as well. So what I'm doing here, I have a relatively stiff royal icing that I've created, and I have that colored and everything. And the vibe I'm kind of going for is like sunflower, but not like super specific. And obviously you can do the same exact technique with any kind of flower that you want, especially depending on how much royal icing you have and what palette knife you're using. And I'm not doing anything fancy. I just dipped my palette knife down into my little bowl of royal icing and then pressed it onto the top of my macaron shell. And I wanted to create a few different layers. So I'm going to let the first layer dry just a bit before I add in some smaller petals and some more details. So I'm just going to go through and do that same exact process again on another macaron here. And I just want to say too, the biggest thing that might be a bit of a difficulty using royal icing versus when you are painting on a cake with buttercream, royal icing dries out a lot faster. And so when you have it in a little dish like this, you'll either want to keep it pretty covered most of the time you're working with it with plastic wrap or something, or be careful and make sure you're stirring it up every so often. And also whatever you're doing, whether you're giving it a little stir or keeping it covered, you will want to work pretty quickly. So I would say try to do like a test run and then kind of go through your macarons. As I mentioned, after doing a handful of macarons like this, I have some more royal icing and I added a little bit of brown into that sort of golden color to go through. I'm using the same palette knife and I'm just going to go through and add some other little streaks and kind of smaller petals. Again, a flower like a daisy or a dahlia or anything like that that has a bunch of petals that are, again, something that you can easily create with a palette knife, just kind of by pressing down, would be super easy to create with this technique. And one thing I really love about this is that it is so artistic, and yet this royal icing is going to dry and harden, and I'll be able to package these, store them for a long time. Whereas if I were doing this with buttercream or a whipped ganache or something like that, I would need to consume this, or my customers would need to consume this within a couple of days. So I really am enjoying playing around with using royal icing with my palette knives. The last little thing I'm going to add on here is just a little brown kind of center. I had my brown royal icing in a piping bag and I decided to just apply it that way, though I did go back in with my palette knife just to kind of smear it around, give it some texture, make it not quite so, I don't know, blobby and circular. I wanted a little bit more of a natural look. And I did not show this in my videos. Everything I have here is centered, pretty much right in the center of the macaron. but I did some other flowers that were off to the side, some smaller ones that were off to the side, and a couple on the same macaron shell. And I really love playing around with the different sizes and styles of flower, even just using these same exact colors. Whereas creating sculpted flowers with palette knives, if you've seen any of my cake videos where I use that technique, that can take so long to pick up the buttercream and put it onto your cake or cupcake or whatever it is. This technique is actually pretty fast. Because you're building up royal icing, it takes a little bit longer to dry and harden, which is super important before these get filled and put into the refrigerator. So honestly, that is the longest part, I think, the drying. You want to make sure that everything is completely dry, that you can touch everything, so that the designs don't get smeared when you are filling and matching your macs, but also so that when they go into the refrigerator or freezer, they're not going to sink in or get weird just with the temperature change and maybe additional moisture. You want everything to be completely dry. Otherwise, these fill and mature just like normal, so don't worry about that, especially with the layers and layers of royal icing. Everything is still really normal. I really hope you enjoyed this short little video. Another way that I like to play around with royal icing. If you try out this technique or any others, you're inspired by any of my other videos, I would love to see your creations. I love seeing what other people do, especially once they see something that I've done and kind of play around with that method. So definitely tag me on Instagram so I can see what you're creating as well. I have a bunch of other videos coming up soon that I think are going to be super fun to watch and play around with. So if you're not already following me or subscribed here or on Instagram, definitely hit the subscribe button down below, and there's a link in the description box for my Instagram handle. Otherwise, you can just type in my name at Maddie Brame. All right, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.